The smell of charcoal and sizzling fat should have been comforting. It was the scent of every summer Saturday of my childhood, a perfume of lazy afternoons and full bellies. But today, it hung heavy in the humid Ohio air, thick with unspoken tension. I watched my 15-year-old daughter, Maya, from the deck. She was trying to make herself small on a patio chair in the corner of the yard, her book a flimsy shield against the world. Her newly dyed hair, a vibrant cascade of cobalt blue, was like a defiant flag in a sea of beige lawn furniture and conservative polo shirts. My mother, Carol, moved with a predatory grace, her plate of potato salad just an excuse to circle her prey. "Maya, dear," she said, her voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. "You're barely eating. Is everything all right?" Maya looked up, her eyes flicking to me for a split second. "I'm fine, Grandma. Just not that hungry. It's that hair, isn't it?" My sister, Jessica, chimed in, sidling up next to Mom. They stood like a united front. "It draws so much attention. It must be exhausting." I put my plastic cup down with a little too much force. "Jess, leave her alone. It's her hair. It's not hurting anyone." My father, Richard, lowered his newspaper from across the lawn. His disapproval was a physical force. "It's hurting this family's reputation, Sarah. It's a sign of rebellion, of disrespect. We didn't raise you to allow your daughter to look like that." "Look like what, Grandpa?" Maya's voice was quiet, but there was a tremor of defiance in it. "Like someone who has her own personality?" That was it. That was the spark. My mother's smile tightened into a thin, hard line. She saw it not as a teenager finding her voice, but as a direct challenge to her authority. The casual family gathering suddenly felt like an ambush. Every casual conversation around us seemed to fade into a low hum, the world narrowing to the four of them standing over my daughter. "Personality is one thing," my mother said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. "Deliberate provocation is another." She turned and walked back toward the house, her steps clipped and purposeful. I felt a knot of pure dread tighten in my stomach. I knew that walk. It was the walk that preceded ultimatums and punishments. Jessica placed a hand on Maya's shoulder, a gesture that was meant to look comforting but was really an anchor. "Mom's right, sweetie. It's for your own good." A moment later, my mother reappeared at the sliding glass door. The sun glinted off something metallic in her hand. It was a pair of heavy, stainless steel kitchen shears, the ones she used for spatchcocking chickens. "We've been patient," Carol announced to the silent yard. "But some lessons need to be taught more directly." Time seemed to warp and stretch, the lazy Sunday afternoon air suddenly thick with menace. The glint of steel in my mother's hand was a discordant note in the symphony of chirping crickets and distant laughter. "Mom, no," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. But Carol's eyes were fixed on Maya, alight with a righteous fury that was terrifying. Before I could move, it happened with a speed that stole my breath. My father, Richard, a man whose hands I once thought could only fix broken things, grabbed Maya's arm. "Hold her still, Jessica," he grunted. My sister, her face a mask of grim determination, seized Maya's other side. Maya let out a strangled cry, a sound of pure disbelief that quickly turned to terror. "What are you doing? Let go of me." I lunged forward, a roar of protest building in my chest, but Richard simply turned his broad shoulder, blocking me. "Stay out of this, Sarah. She needs to learn." His voice was calm, detached, as if he were discussing pruning a rose bush, not assaulting his own granddaughter. I slammed my fists against his back, a futile, pathetic rhythm. "Dad, stop. You're hurting her, let her go." But they didn't listen. They were a single, monstrous unit of control. They dragged Maya, kicking and struggling, towards a patio chair. "Please stop, I'm sorry, please." Maya's screams tore through me, each one a physical blow. They pinned her down, her small frame no match for their combined strength. Carol loomed over her, the kitchen scissors poised like a weapon. "This is for your own good," my mother said, her voice shaking with conviction. "To teach you respect." The first snip was a sickening, brutal sound. A chunk of vibrant blue hair fell to the manicured lawn, a splash of rebellion extinguished on the green grass. Another snip, then another. Maya's pleas dissolved into ragged, gut-wrenching sobs. I could only watch, trapped behind the wall of my father's body, my own screams choked by a wave of nauseating helplessness. It wasn't a haircut, it was a violation, an act of mutilation. They were shearing her like an animal, hacking away at her identity with every cruel cut. When it was over, they stepped back, their chests heaving. My father finally released his grip, and I stumbled forward. Maya was crumpled in the chair, her body racked with silent, shuddering sobs. Her hair was a disaster, jagged, uneven tufts sticking out at odd angles, with patches cut brutally short to the scalp. The vibrant blue was now a mangled memory. I knelt in front of her, my heart shattering into a million pieces. I reached out to touch her, but she flinched away. I looked from my daughter's devastated face to my family. They stood there, looking not at Maya, but at me, their expressions expectant, waiting for my submission. But they didn't see surrender. In the cold, dead pit of my stomach, the grief was burning away, leaving behind something hard and sharp. It was rage, a calm, silent, and absolute rage. They had drawn a line, and I knew, with chilling certainty, that I would make them pay for crossing it. The metallic clatter of the scissors hitting the flagstone patio echoed in the sudden, thick silence. Richard and Jessica finally released Maya, stepping back with heaving chests as if they'd just run a race. A flicker of shock, maybe even horror at their own actions, crossed Carol's face before it hardened again into a mask of grim satisfaction. Maya remained on the ground, completely still, her small hands clutching the severed, vibrant blue locks scattered on her lap like fallen feathers. A cold, terrifying clarity washed over me. The pleading was over. The negotiation was over. I walked forward, my movements precise and devoid of the frantic energy I'd felt just moments before. I knelt, my hands gentle on Maya's trembling shoulders. "Come on, sweetie, we're going home." Her eyes, wide and vacant, met mine. She didn't speak, simply allowed me to help her to her feet. I turned and faced my family, the three of them standing there like statues in a museum of cruelty. "You will never see her again," I said, my voice low and dangerously calm. "You will never speak to her again. We're done." I didn't wait for a response. I guided my daughter, who moved like a ghost, through the back door, past the living room where family photos now seemed like a grotesque lie, and out the front door. The click of it closing behind us was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. The car ride back to our apartment in southeast Portland was a cocoon of shared trauma. Maya huddled against the passenger window, the city lights blurring through her silent tears. The steady drizzle that had begun to fall streaked the glass, mirroring the tracks on her cheeks. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, each red traffic light a test of my composure. My rage wasn't a hot, explosive thing anymore. It was a block of ice in my chest, solid and heavy. Once inside our small apartment, the lock sliding into place felt like a final shield. The safety of our own space was overwhelming, and Maya's fragile composure shattered. She collapsed into my arms, her body racked with deep, gut-wrenching sobs. I just held her, stroking what was left of her hair, whispering, "I've got you. I'm so sorry. I've got you." Later, after she'd cried herself into an exhausted sleep, I stood in the bathroom, staring at my own reflection. The anger was still there, but it was transforming, sharpening into a tool. They hadn't just cut her hair. They had tried to cut away her spirit, to punish her for being herself. An apology wouldn't be enough. Legal action felt too cold, too impersonal. This required something else. A statement. An act of solidarity so visible, so undeniable, that it would burn into their minds forever. My laptop glowed in the dark living room. My fingers flew across the keyboard, searching for Portland Sunrise, the local morning news show. I found an email address for a producer, Linda Knowles. With a pounding heart, I started to type. I told her everything, not as a hysterical victim, but as a mother with a story that needed to be told. I explained what I wanted to do, live on her show. My finger hovered over the send button for a single, terrifying second. Then I clicked. The message was gone. There was no going back. The reply came the next morning, a sterile, one-line email that made Sarah's heart hammer against her ribs. "Miss Miller, thank you for your inquiry. Please expect a call from our producer, Linda Knowles, this afternoon." The day crawled by in a haze of anxiety. Sarah tried to work from her laptop at the small kitchen table, but the words on the screen were just a jumble of black marks. She kept glancing at Maya's closed bedroom door, the silence from within a constant, heavy presence. The assault had stolen her daughter's laughter, replacing it with a quiet, fragile retreat. When her phone finally buzzed with an unknown number, Sarah's hand trembled as she answered. "Hello, is this Sarah Miller?" The voice was crisp, professional, and held no warmth. "Yes, this is she." "Sarah, this is Linda Knowles from Channel 8 News. I'm a producer for Portland Morning Live. I received your email." There was a pause. It was memorable. Sarah took a deep breath, clutching the phone tightly. "Thank you for calling me back." "Let's cut to it," Linda said, her tone all business. "You're proposing to shave your head on live television. I get a dozen pitches a day from people wanting their 15 minutes of fame. Why is your story different? Why should I give you airtime over a charity bake sale or a local author?" The question was a bucket of ice water, snapping Sarah out of her fear and into focus. This wasn't just about her. "Because this isn't about fame," Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. "This is about an assault that happened in a place my daughter was supposed to feel safe. My family, her grandparents and aunt, held my 15-year-old child down and hacked off her hair with kitchen scissors because they didn't like the color." She could hear Linda typing softly on the other end. "That's a serious allegation." "It's the truth," Sarah stated, the cold rage from the barbecue flaring back to life. "They called her rebellious, disrespectful. They did it to teach her a lesson. But the only lesson they taught her was that expressing herself is dangerous. That love can be used as a weapon." "And shaving your head, what's the message there?" Linda pressed, her voice still skeptical, but now with a flicker of intrigue. "The message is solidarity," Sarah explained, pacing her small living room. "They tried to shame her into conformity. They attacked her identity. My shaving my head says, you are not alone. There is nothing wrong with you. Your body, your hair, your choices, they are yours." It's a message for Maya, but it's also for every kid who's been told they're too much or not right. "My family committed their act of cruelty in the privacy of their backyard. I want my act of support to be public and undeniable." The line was quiet for a long moment. Sarah's heart pounded in the silence. She'd said it all. It was either enough or it wasn't. Finally, Linda spoke, her tone changed. "Okay, Sarah. That's a powerful angle. It's raw, it's real." Another pause. "Friday morning. We have a segment at 7:45 a.m. It's a tight slot, but we can make it work. I need you to be sure. Once you're in that studio, there's no turning back." The words hung in the air, a terrifying, exhilarating promise. "I'm sure," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper, the decision settling in her bones like stone. "I'll be there." The click of the phone ending the call echoed in the sudden silence of the living room. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, the receiver still cool against her palm. Friday. It wasn't a vague idea anymore. It had a date, a time, a name, Portland Morning Live. A wave of nausea, cold and sharp, washed over her. It was one thing to compose a furious email in the dead of night, fueled by righteous anger. It was another thing entirely to hear a cheerful producer schedule your personal act of defiance between a weather report and a segment on local chefs. She sank onto the sofa, her hands trembling slightly. Could she really do this? Go on television and invite the entire city into her family's ugliest moment? Her fear was a physical presence, a weight on her chest. But then the image of Maya's face, streaked with tears and framed by hacked, uneven tufts of blue, flashed in her mind. The fear didn't vanish, but it was eclipsed by a familiar, steely resolve. This wasn't about her. This was about Maya. She found her daughter in her bedroom, lying on her back and staring at the ceiling, headphones on but no music playing. The silence between them, since the barbecue had been heavy, fragile. Sarah gently sat on the edge of the bed, waiting until Maya's eyes flickered towards her. She pulled the headphones off her daughter's ears. "I need to tell you something," Sarah began, her voice softer than she intended. I'm going to do something." Maya just watched her, her expression unreadable. "I called the news station." "The local morning show," Sarah said, the words feeling clumsy and absurd. "On Friday morning, I'm going on TV and I'm going to shave my head." Maya's eyes widened. She sat up abruptly. "What?" "Mom, no. Why? Everyone will stare at you. You can't do that." The protest was exactly what Sarah had expected, a teenager's fear of being singled out, now transferred to her mother. "Sweetheart, listen to me," Sarah said, taking Maya's hand. "It was cold. What they did to you wasn't just a bad haircut. It was a violation. They took away your choice. They tried to make you feel small and ashamed for being yourself. Shaving my head, it's not to punish them. It's to show you, and them, and anyone who watches that we are not ashamed. It's my choice, my body. They don't get to have the final say on who we are." She watched Maya's face, saw the flicker of understanding warring with the embarrassment. Tears welled in Maya's eyes. "But it's your hair, it's so long." "It's just hair," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking for the first time. "It'll grow back, but you need to know right now that I am with you, completely. I'm so incredibly proud of you, Maya. Blue hair, no hair, it doesn't matter. I'm on your team always." The dam broke. Maya lunged forward, wrapping her arms around Sarah's neck and sobbing into her shoulder. It wasn't the broken, terrified crying from the barbecue, but a cry of release, of profound, aching relief. Sarah held her tightly, the weight on her own chest finally lightening. Friday still loomed, terrifying and uncertain, but now she knew she wouldn't be facing it alone. Friday arrived under a blanket of quintessential Portland gray, the low-hanging clouds seeming to press down on the city, mirroring the weight in Sarah's chest. The morning air in their small apartment was thick with unspoken tension. Every sound was magnified: the clink of a spoon against a ceramic bowl, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant rumble of the Max train. They moved around each other in a quiet, careful dance. Sarah watched Maya pick at her cereal, her daughter's eyes fixed on the spoon as if it held the secrets of the universe. There were no words of encouragement, no last-minute pep talks. Their solidarity existed in the shared silence, in the way Maya's hand briefly found Sarah's as they stood by the door. A small, grounding pressure that said everything that needed to be said. The drive to the KGW studio downtown was surreal. The familiar streets, Burnside, with its eclectic mix of old buildings and new boutiques, the graceful arch of the Fremont Bridge, felt alien, like a set for a movie in which Sarah was an unwilling star. Her hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel, and a nauseous knot twisted in her stomach. She glanced at Maya, who stared out the passenger window, her reflection a pale, solemn mask. For a terrifying second, Sarah wanted to turn the car around, to retreat back to the anonymity of their lives. But then the image of Maya's tear-streaked face, framed by hacked, uneven clumps of hair, flashed in her mind. The knot in her stomach tightened, but now it was forged with resolve. Parking in the designated visitor spot felt like the final, irreversible step. The studio building was an imposing structure of glass and steel. Inside, the hushed quiet of their morning was shattered by a controlled chaos. Phones rang, people with headsets moved with brisk purpose, and the air smelled of coffee and electronics. A young, energetic assistant greeted them and led them through a maze of corridors. "Linda's waiting for you in the green room," she said brightly, oblivious to the gravity pulling Sarah toward the floor. The green room was a small, windowless box with a drab couch, a television broadcasting the current segment, and a tray of untouched pastries. Linda Knowles stood to greet them, her handshake firm and her gaze direct. She was shorter than Sarah expected, but exuded an aura of calm authority. "Sarah, Maya, thank you for coming," she said, her voice softer than it had been on the phone. "We have water coffee. The segment is in about 15 minutes. The host, Mark, is fully briefed. Just remember what we talked about. Speak your truth." Sarah could only nod, her throat too tight to form words. She sat on the couch, her body rigid. Maya sat beside her, her knee pressed firmly against Sarah's. The minutes crawled by, each one a small eternity. Finally, the assistant reappeared at the door. "We're ready for you, Sarah." Time stopped. She looked at Maya, who gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was enough. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Sarah stood up and followed the assistant down a short, dark hallway toward a brilliant square of light. The roar of her own blood pounded in her ears, drowning out the disembodied voice of the host introducing the next segment. She stepped through the doorway, and the world dissolved into a blinding glare. The studio lights were hotter and brighter than Sarah had imagined, a stark white glare that erased the audience and left only the host, Mark, and the unblinking eyes of 3 cameras. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but as she sat down, a strange calm settled over her. This was real. This was happening. Mark's voice was gentle, guiding her. "Sarah, thank you for being here. Can you tell us why you made the brave decision to come on our show today?" Taking a steadying breath, Sarah looked directly into the center camera, picturing Maya watching backstage. 2 days ago, at a family barbecue, my parents and sister held my 15-year-old daughter down and forcibly cut her hair. She began, her voice even but laced with a cold, hard anger. They did it because she had dyed it blue. They said she needed to be taught a lesson in respect. But what they taught her was that her body wasn't her own, that her identity was something to be punished. She paused, letting the weight of her words fill the silent studio. "I am here today because love should not be conditional. It shouldn't be a weapon. And I want my daughter, and every person watching who has ever been made to feel small for who they are, to know that they are seen, that they are worthy of unconditional love and respect." Mark slid a pair of black electric clippers across the table. They felt heavy and cold in Sarah's trembling hand. He nodded, his expression one of deep empathy. "Whenever you're ready, Sarah." She switched them on. The low, electric hum vibrated through her arm, a sound of finality. Lifting the clippers to her temple, she saw her own wide, terrified eyes in a monitor. For a split second, she hesitated. Then she thought of Maya's sheared, patchy hair, of her silent tears in the car. Her resolve hardened into steel. She pressed the clippers to her scalp and pushed forward. A thick lock of her brown hair fell away, landing on the black cape draped over her shoulders. Then another and another. With each pass, a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying lifted. The weight of her parents' approval, of Jessica's judgment, of a lifetime spent trying to be the person they wanted. It all fell away with her hair, leaving a feeling of raw, terrifying freedom. When she finished, the studio was utterly still. She placed the clippers down, her hand no longer shaking, and raised her head. Her scalp tingled in the cool studio air. She looked into the camera one last time. "Maya," she said, her voice thick with emotion but unbroken, "you are beautiful, you are perfect. Never let anyone tell you otherwise." The segment ended. As the applause sign lit up and the crew began to stir, Sarah walked off the set, feeling light and exposed. Maya was standing there, just beyond the lights, her eyes shimmering with tears. She didn't say a word. She just rushed forward, wrapping her arms around Sarah in a fierce hug. Sarah buried her face in her daughter's shoulder, finally letting go of the breath she'd been holding. Maya pulled back slightly and gently touched Sarah's newly bare head, a small, sad smile on her face. "You're beautiful, Mom." Walking out of the KGW building and into the cool Portland morning, the city felt different, brighter. The future was unwritten, the rift with her family a painful, open wound. But as Maya slipped her hand into hers, Sarah knew they would face it together. Stronger, freer, unbroken.